morning, everybody. And there is breaking news on this Wednesday morning. One final vote now stands between Republicans and the first major overhaul of the tax code in a generation. This would be a big victory. That vote will happen sometime this morning. The president will hold a news conference later this afternoon, so we will have live coverage as we move throughout the day on this. Good morning. Hope you had a great night. Welcome to America's Newsroom. I'm Bill Hemmer.
What a wild day. What a wild week. Merry Christmas, Bill. Good to see everybody. I'm Sandra Smith. This is a moment years in the making for congressional Republicans. The House will vote on the bill one more time this morning. This after it squeaked by the Senate 51-48 in a late night vote packed with debate and theatrics.
After 8 straight years of slow growth and underperformance, America is ready to take off. We can't sell this to the American people. We ought to go into another line of work.
Not one, not two. Every single Democrat stands united. Why? Because they can't stand the president.
This is serious stuff. We believe you're messing up America. You could pay attention for a couple of minutes. That's what this bill is. It's an absolute disgrace.
The Sergeant at Arms will restore order in the gallery. On this vote, the ayes are 51. The nays are 48. The Senate recedes from its amendment and concurs in H.R. 1 with further amendment. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is passed.
So that was about 1:45 Eastern time this morning. This tweet about 2 a.m. from the president. The United States Senate just passed the biggest in history tax cut and reform bill. Terrible individual mandate, Obamacare repealed. Goes to the House tomorrow morning for final vote. If approved, there will be a news conference at the White House at approximately 1 o'clock Eastern time.
Peter Doocy is live on Capitol Hill for us bright and early this morning. Peter, are House leaders worried about having to re-vote on this tax bill this morning?
It doesn't sound like it, Sandra, because the Republicans that we've heard from last night and today are still riding high on that first crack that they got at voting for this tax reform bill.
It was a very emotional time because I used to be, Jack Kemp was my mentor, and I've been working on this issue pretty much my adult life because I just feel so passionately that this is going to help get people from welfare to work. It's going to get people higher wages, better jobs. It's going to put the American economy in the lead in the global economy again. So I feel very passionate about it.
Part of the reasoning Democratic senators gave the parliamentarian when they complained that the tax bill broke budget rules, forcing a re-vote in the House today, was that the name of the package, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, was no good. Another violation they flagged, that Senator Ted Cruz wanted people to have an option to put 529 savings plans towards homeschooling. And very, very late last night, he hit the Senate floor to hammer Democrats for removing education provisions.
I would ask my friends on the Democratic side of the aisle, there are going to be issues we disagree on. But the vote to allow parents of children with disabilities to spend their own funds in a tax-advantaged fund to provide for educational therapy for those kids with disabilities, that ought to be 100-0.
After a few days of hand-wringing by Republican leaders, all GOP senators that were present voted yes. Sandra.
We knew heading into this, though, that Jeff Flake was a holdout. How did leadership convince him to vote yes last night, Peter?
He hinted at this at a very, very early morning tweet. He wrote this: bipartisan DACA bill will be on Senate floor in January. Now, that's something that Democrats in Congress have been trying to make happen by the end of this year, so in December, a deal that would give DREAM Act beneficiaries some kind of clarity in exchange for Democratic support of the budget deal. Now, we do not know yet if January is going to be good enough for Democrats to vote on that budget deal, because Democrats are spending all the time that they get in front of a microphone savoring what they think is going to be a great bill for them, even though none of them voted for it, the tax bill.
Though the Republican propagandists may call its passage a political victory, it will be very fleeting and illusory. The substance and polling are so rotten that a year from now, Republicans will be running away from this bill in shame for voting yes this evening.
So Chuck Schumer not feeling any reason to celebrate today, but Republicans do, and they will be at the White House early this afternoon doing just that. Sandra?
After that vote takes place this morning in the House, Peter Doocy, thank you.
So what is in it, and is it a good bill in the end? The former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, Fox News contributor with me live now. Sir, and good day to you, and a Merry Christmas, and thank you for being back here. I think the ultimate arbiter of the bill of the law will be the U.S. economy. How it reacts certainly determines success or failure. In a broad stroke, what is the anticipation for the American worker and the American economy, do you think, from this legislation?
Look, I think there are two big parts of this. One is, if you're a working middle-class person, if you're a parent, this bill means more money in your pocket, period. No matter what Chuck Schumer says, no matter what lies he tells, the fact is, if you're an everyday working American, if you have kids, in both those circumstances, you're going to have more money when this bill goes through. But the second part of it's even more important. This is going to launch an American economic growth pattern that will be enormous. Steve Moore, who's a great economist, estimates will be well above 4% real growth next year, something we never saw with Barack Obama for 8 straight years. And remember, Paul Ryan has spent 25 years, starting in it with his days back with Bob Caston and Jack Kemp, working on how do you grow the American economy. This has been his passion. We really do believe, and from my standpoint, having worked with Ronald Reagan, I can tell you flatly, this kind of bill, returning money to small business, returning money so people can invest, returning money to workers, we are for lower taxes, more jobs, higher take-home pay. People like Chuck Schumer are for higher taxes, more welfare, and bigger government. That's going to be a fun campaign in 18 to choose those two. And in my prediction, I'll be back in the show next year. We'll talk about it. I predict this economy is going to do very, very well.
Now, just let's take the other side of it, okay? What's the pitfall? What do you think about what the possibility of unintended consequences for a big piece of legislation as to what can possibly go wrong? Does it gain you votes next November, or do you lose votes as a result of it? Or can you say today?
I like... You know, Mitch McConnell had a line where he said, if we can't sell this, we need to find a new line of work. The elite news media spent the last 6 months lying about this bill, just plain lying about it. I saw one amazing interview where they had the chairman of Ways and Means on, and they wanted to focus on one narrow provision which no normal American has any clue about, but it's what they wanted to fight over. As people begin to look, starting in February and March, and I talked to some folks who work for us at Gingrich Productions who have a couple kids. They're looking at a tax credit, not a deduction, a credit. That's $1 off your taxes. They're doubling the child tax credit. Well, if you got 2 or 3 kids, you know, that's an extra $1,000 off your taxes per child that stays in your pocket. If you're a normal middle-class person, we're now doubling your deduction, so you now have to earn $24,000 before you pay a penny. We're also lowering the rate at which you'll pay it. Small businesses are going to see a huge breakthrough. And frankly, if you're an American corporation, we just took you from the highest corporate tax rate in the world, tied, I think, with Japan. We just brought you down to being competitive with anybody in the world. That's going to lead to new investment in the U.S. I think AT&T just announced another $1 billion investment 2 days ago. You're going to see small business boom. You're going to see people have better jobs with higher pay, with lower taxes, and you're going to see corporations saying, you know, I want to build in America again, not overseas.
That's optimistic, and time will show whether that is the case. There are 2 big pieces buried in this legislation that have been debated for decades: drilling in Alaska and ANWR. The repeal of the Obamacare mandate, they are both involved in. They're not even getting headlines at the moment on that. That goes to show how big this law is. When you marry this with the speech from the other day about the national security strategy, when the president was talking about the healthy American economy and what that means here and overseas, how do you match that message over the past 48 hours?
Look, I've urged every sophisticated citizen to read the new national security strategy. It is a huge, profound break with the last 20 years, and I think it's an important break. And one of the keys is it says, if we're going to be the leading country in the world, we have to be the leading economy, we have to have the leading technology, we have to do the things that provide the base for our military. It's not about just having a strong military. You have to have a strong economy and strong technology as the pinning of that, as the foundation of that. I thought it was very appropriate in my newsletter, which will go out tomorrow. I'm talking about these two achievements as fitting together. Trump says he wants to create jobs to make America great again, and he wants America to be the strongest country in the world. They both come together this week in what I think is an enormously historic achievement. This is the week that proves to people Donald J. Trump is a serious person achieving serious things despite all the hostile news coverage.
Last question here, and I need a quick answer. You got to run. Why does the polling suggest the American people don't believe in this tax law? What would explain that? Have they not sold it well, or is it more than that?
You've had 6 months. You've had 6 months, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CBS News, NBC News, ABC News, all lying about it. I mean, if the only thing you heard was left-wing diatribes, you're not going to believe it either. Let's see next spring, when people have money in their pocket. I want to see how that gets explained on the MSNBC. When small businesses are out creating new jobs, I want to see how the New York Times explains that that's a bad thing, particularly when they're minority businesses and women-owned businesses and they're creating new jobs. Let's see how the elite media explains how fundamentally false it's been.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Newt Gingrich, a Merry Christmas to you, and thank you for all your insight on that. You got it. Nice to have you back. Sandra, what's next?
All right. Well, we have a packed morning and show ahead. We will have much more on the impending passage of tax reform with Republican Senator John Barrasso. His thoughts on his chamber's historic vote overnight coming up at the bottom of the hour. You know, it's going to be great to talk to everybody and hearing from Newt Gingrich. Yep. So important. I mean, really, as you mentioned, it didn't pass till the wee hours of the morning.
1:45.
So taking it all in this morning.
Yes, we are. Okay, more on that coming up here. Also, there's this today. Some of the other big stories developing right now. A bus packed with passengers crashing on a way to a popular tourist destination. There are several dead. Americans among the injured are now investigators trying to piece together what went wrong there. We will check that out in a moment.
Plus, the liberation of Mosul played a crucial role in forcing ISIS out of Iraq. But we're now learning about just how big a human price was paid for that victory. Plus, there's this.
It shows how far Obama was willing to go to get this terrible deal that was so one-sided.
This news report now rocking Washington, claiming the Obama administration gave Hezbollah a pass in order to secure the Iran nuclear deal. Former Obama aide said it's simply not true. Should Congress investigate? We'll look into that next.
Allegation that any administration would ignore one terrorist group because you were trying to curry favor with another terrorist group. It is incendiary. It is worthy of investigation across several different committees of Congress.
The battle to liberate Mosul from ISIS control was a siege that went on for 9 bloody months. And now an Associated Press investigation is revealing between 9,000 and 11,000 civilians died in the crossfire. That death toll is 10 times higher than previously reported. ISIS is responsible for the majority of the deaths, but as many as 3,000 innocent people were killed in coalition airstrikes or artillery fire.
Their policy of rapprochement with Iran and their effort to get the nuclear deal created a political climate where the result was a derailment of this policy. So some efforts were intentional. I think some were not.
So that's Josh Meyer. He's a reporter for Politico with Shannon last night, standing by his story that the Obama administration allowed Hezbollah a pass in order to get the Iran nuclear deal done, including allowing Hezbollah to raise money through the sale of illegal drugs around the world. Wow. Former Obama officials dismissed the report. They say it's not true, including former State Department spokeswoman Marie Harf. And Marie, good morning to you back there, well ensconced in Washington, and Brad Blakeman, former Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush here in New York. And good morning to both of you. Marie, you have been very pointed in your denials of this story. Go ahead and respond to Josh's interview from last evening.
Absolutely. I mean, first, the Obama administration took many actions against Hezbollah, so to say we gave them a pass is just not true. But on this story, what I think happened is there were the sources he had who didn't get their way in policy fights, not because of the Iran nuclear deal, but because the CIA didn't like what they were proposing. DOJ didn't like it for totally unrelated reasons. But it's easier to blame everything they don't like on the Iran nuclear deal because other people don't like it too. And so there's no evidence to back up their claim that the nuclear deal got this outcome.
He was specifically,
there's just no evidence.
He was asked specifically about that and said the following about his sources in the piece. Again, back to the interview last night with Shannon.
To say that the people that I quoted were low-level people is sort of ridiculous. These were the people that led this task force. They were not ideologues. They're not flawed. I don't know what she's talking about.
There it is, Marie. And Brad, your reaction there then?
Look, there's no doubt that there are some things that are known, and there are facts, and that is the Iran deal is a bad deal. And leading up to the Iran deal in 2010, John Brennan, who was assistant to the President Obama at the time for counterterrorism and homeland security, made a speech where he said he's looking for moderate elements of Hezbollah to deal with. They were taking their foot off the gas with one terrorist group in order to make a deal with another one. And it's clear that the incompetence of the Obama administration, whether it's in Iran or letting the Russians march into the Ukraine, or the Chinese build military bases out of the South China Sea, appeasement and apology got us to the point where President Trump has now got to fix what President Obama broke all over the world.
Serious matters, no laughing here. Marie, go ahead and respond to that.
Well, it's just when we use the word appeasement and just start naming countries, that's not a serious debate. And I don't know why Brad's bringing up 2010. We didn't even start the Iran talks till the end of 2013. So let's get our timing.
You were leading up to it, Marie.
Okay, I was there, Brad. I was part of this, and I was there. And so let's just get our facts right. This Politico story alleges that we made a DEA project less successful because of the Iran deal. That is not true. There's no evidence to back that up. And just saying it and having sources who say it doesn't make it true. So we can debate Obama foreign policy towards Hezbollah. I'm happy to have that conversation. But when you blame everything you don't like on the nuclear deal, it just becomes a conspiracy theory fest, and it's not based in reality.
Well, where was Hezbollah getting their money then?
We sanctioned Hezbollah repeatedly.
Terrorism?
Barack Obama signed a Hezbollah sanctions bill. We sanctioned them repeatedly through executive action as well. We took numerous actions against them. Again, debate Hezbollah policy, blame it on the Iran deal. That is just a way to get headlines, but it's not based in what actually happened.
Hezbollah was shattered after the war of 2006 with Israel. They were looking for more money, and how they got it in the end, well, this is what's being reported here now. John Bolton is arguing that the administration under Barack Obama was prepared to give Tehran anything in order to get this deal done. Marie.
I just so fundamentally disagree with that. And let's take a step back. The Iran nuclear deal was important because it took the most pressing threat off the table, which is a nuclear-armed Iran. We can debate the merits of that deal, but trying to get a diplomatic solution is something that Republicans and Democrats have agreed for a very long time is important. We waited months and months. We kept pushing at the negotiating table. We threatened to walk away until we got a good deal, and that's why it's still in place.
This is critical. The sources say the closer we got to the Iran deal, the more these activities went away. Brad, last comment on that. I got to run, almost out of time.
There is no doubt that Hezbollah, even though they were quote unquote sanctioned, were given a blind eye by the United States government. We appeased one group to embolden another, and now we're paying the price for that deal.
There's just no evidence for that.
Project Cassandra is the name. Marie, thank you. Brad, thanks for your debating on that as well. Okay.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
To both of you, thanks for being here.
Fox News alert, we are waiting a tax bill revote on the House floor after the Senate approved the tweaked bill overnight. Are investors buying on the hope of tax reform?
Oh.
We will get reaction on Wall Street markets open just a few minutes after the passage of that. Fox News alert for you. We are waiting a higher open on Wall Street this morning. U.S. futures rising after the Senate approves the sweeping $1.5 trillion tax reform package early this morning. Now the House is preparing to revote on the bill with approval expected later today. And let's bring in Fox Business Network's Making Money host Charles Payne. Always good to get your take on things. So you know me, I was up in the middle of the night looking at what's the stock market doing after this thing passed. And it is still excited. Even though we've seen record after record, it looks like it's still going up now that this has passed.
Absolutely. And you know, it's a huge hurdle. We kind of anticipated it, but now that it's going to be a reality, companies are reacting very quickly to this.
FedEx came came out last night and said we're going to hire based on this. They raised their earnings forecast, right?
FedEx last night posted their earnings, and what was amazing about this, when people say, well, it doesn't affect people, it doesn't unless you're in the market, one of the main things that caught my eye from FedEx is they're going to fund their pensions with these tax savings, and then they'll still have enough money that their earnings per share will go up as well. And listen to what the CEO said, because this is one of the best businessmen, by the way, in America. He says it's going to enhance income opportunities, improve our competitiveness, increase our business investment, expand job opportunities. This is from the CEO of FedEx, okay? If you want an unbiased proxy out there, unbiased opinion about what this tax bill will do for the average American or the country, you have it right there.
So how do you respond to Democrats this morning who are saying this is a tax cut for the wealthy and this benefits only big corporations and businesses?
It's heartbreaking that they're saying that. It really is. But I think they're hurting themselves because they've managed to get expectations down so low. Those are going to be pretty low hurdles to clear. And the first hurdle is going to be cleared in February when people start saying, oh, my goodness, I've got more money. I kept more and all these initials on my check got less. They're going to be very happy about that. And then their wages will start going up toward the end of the year. And then they'll start getting better job opportunities. So I think the Democrats actually have done themselves a real disfavor because they've done a good job with the media. They've got expectations so low, but when people actually see how this impacts their lives, I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised.
Job growth is one thing, but then the economic growth that we're talking about here, you had the president initially talking about 4%, 5%, 6% economic growth as a result of this. And now it seems like those projections are tamed to like 3% annual GDP growth.
3% is phenomenal. We haven't had 3% in a very long time, over a decade, and we haven't had really sustained growth. In the last 2 weeks, let me tell you, talking about the economy, we had amazing data on housing. Housing numbers out yesterday. Housing starts were absolutely phenomenal. By the way, driven by single-family homes. Household formation, those are the best numbers in 10 years. Traffic, household traffic, in terms of people just looking at homes, knocking on doors, that's at a high it hasn't been since 1998.
Do you attribute that to this presidency, as young as it is? I
would give 80 to 90% of the credit to President Trump for unlocking the potential of America. It's in our DNA, particularly corporate America. Sandra, you remember that Supreme Court ruling and that led to people arguing, are corporations people? I always say, forget about whether they're people. They are entities. And like any entity, they want to grow, they want to thrive, and they want to carve out more. You know how you do that? You hire people, you invest in research and development. Companies did not do that for 8 years. They were in a foxhole. Now they're back to their natural state of being. So is the American consumer, so is the American. And telling you, we're getting back to our natural DNA of excellence.
Let me finish with this. As we see a stock market that is about to open, it has been rising record after record, I believe 70 records since the president was elected. And you have that notion of sell the news. Hemmer and I talk about this a lot. Right. You cover the financial markets long enough, and you see that sometimes the markets move up in anticipation of something great like this getting done. Is there a possibility we might see investors say, all right, it's done now, and sell and get out of this market and actually see some type of correction or sell-off?
It's always a possibility, but I will go to what Navistar, a big truck maker in America, said yesterday. Class 8 orders for trucks, we're talking trucks that cost 6 figures, are up so much. They've already said 2018 will be one of the best years in the last decade for the trucking industry. So I'm listening to the people who are actually on the ground, not the pundits, certainly not the polls, and certainly not the mainstream media.
Our laugher who worked under Reagan, he was on here yesterday, and he said this stock market's going to keep going up as far as the eye can see. So
listen to
the
corporate America.
There.
Listen to corporate America.
We're listening to you, Charles Payne. All right, thank you very much, sir. Good to see you.
Charles in charge. Meanwhile, here's how some Democrats feel about tax reform today.
Though the Republican propagandists may call its passage a political victory, it will be very fleeting and illusory.
Board. On the other side of this break and on the other side of the aisle, Republicans are getting ready to achieve their first legislative victory of the year. Senator John Barrasso on deck for his reaction coming up next. Also, the search for answers in that deadly train crash in Washington State. We're now learning about the engineer who was driving that train.
In some sense, we're all on that train. Many of us, including people that I work with for the state of Washington, are in the hospitals and have been victims of this. This is something that's touched every family, and our hearts are with all of the families.
The Justice Department official who was demoted after revelations about undisclosed meetings with Fusion GPS will be on Capitol Hill today. Fusion GPS, of course, is the firm behind that unverified anti-Trump dossier. Orr's wife was also paid by that firm. Bruce Orr will be interviewed by the Senate Intelligence Committee. His appearance comes just a day after Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe went through his own marathon session with House investigators. McCabe was questioned for nearly 8 hours about claims of bias and conflicts of interest inside the Bureau. Next hour, constitutional attorney Jonathan Turley will be here to discuss it all.
In the meantime, the investigation continues now in Washington state after that deadly Amtrak crash. They are now looking into whether or not the driver of that train was distracted by someone he was training on the job. Claudia Cowan looks at that live in DuPont, Washington. Claudia, good morning.
Well, Bill, good morning. Along with excessive speed, federal investigators are looking at whether the engineer who was driving this train may, in fact, have been distracted, as you said. They say that the emergency brake activated automatically when this train, which you'll recall was traveling 50 miles over the speed limit, jumped the tracks. They say the engineer did not activate it manually, nor was he alone in the locomotive.
There were two people in the cab, the engineer and a conductor who was getting experience and familiarizing himself with the territory. The actual conductor, as there is one on every train, was in the actual passenger section at the time of the accident.
Officials say the engineer was qualified and had been operating the train in this area in the last couple of weeks. All 5 crew members were hospitalized. Investigators say they hope to speak to them in the next few days. 2 of the 3 people who were killed were passionate advocates for public transportation. Friends say Jim Hammer and Zach Wilhoit were excited to be on the maiden voyage of Amtrak's new high-speed service between Seattle and Portland, and how ironic and sad that they perished in a train accident and just 1 week before Christmas. The mangled passenger cars that spilled onto the freeway have been hauled away for further examination as Amtrak comes under fire for launching its new line before activating speed control technology that they say might have prevented Monday's derailment. Meantime, a 4-mile stretch here of Interstate 5 remains closed. Just moments ago, state highway officials said they still need to move a locomotive out of the way and make sure the roadway is safe before they reopen 1, maybe 2 lanes, best case scenario, hopefully later today, Bill.
Wow. Claudia Cowan, thank you, live in DuPont, Washington.
This is a Fox News alert as we await history in the House this morning. Lawmakers will vote one final time, likely sending the largest overhaul of the U.S. tax code in over 3 decades to the president's desk. But the bill will likely pass without a single Democrat vote in the House or the Senate. Democrats, in fact, making their opposition more than clear.
This is the worst bill to ever come to the floor of the House, with stiff competition for what some of the things they've tried to do. It's disgusting smash and grab.
This tax bill will be an anchor around the ankles of every Republican. If they haven't learned it yet, they're going to learn it next November. Republicans will rue the day they pass this bill.
Joining me now is Wyoming Senator John Barrasso, chairman of the Senate Republican Policy Committee. Senator, well, congrats on a big victory for your party and for the president last evening.
Thanks, Sandra. Great victory for the American people, who will get the tax relief and the tax reduction and the tax cuts that President Trump and Republicans have been promising. Great day for the American first economy, because you see the stories. Additional investments are going to come. People will continue to do what we need to do: invest in America, hire American workers, and let people keep more of their hard-earned money.
So it sounds like you've had a chance to take it all in this morning and sort of take a victory lap. You know, what do you think when you hear Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, Pelosi calling this a tax scam and brazen theft of the middle class, Chuck Schumer saying the Republican Party will come to rue the day they voted for this?
You know, Nancy Pelosi has said that this is who we are. This is why we came to Washington. We did come to Washington to grow the economy, to give people more freedom. And Nancy Pelosi and folks like her come to Washington to grow the government. I mean, that is fundamentally the difference. The American people are going to be the final deciders on this, and they're going to see it when they have more take-home pay, when wages go up, when they're able to keep more of their hard-earned money. This is a great day for America. The economy has been growing. You know, there are 2 million new jobs created since the day Donald Trump was elected president in this country. Economic growth has been at a pace recently that it hasn't been at for the last 10 years. So we're heading on the right path for a very optimistic, strong, confident future.
I got to ask you, though, Senator, are you concerned at all about the surging optimism we have seen, not even since the vote actually happened, but leading up to this? We just did a segment on the U.S. stock market. 70 records so far this year for the Dow. It's up 25% for 2017, largely in anticipation of this getting done. There are big expectations and high hopes. This is going to lead to some tremendous growth.
Well, part of it is that. The other part is what we've already accomplished. You know, we have eliminated so many regulations, these onerous, punishing, burdensome regulations of the Obama administration. President Trump and Republicans came into office, eliminated so many of those to give people freedom back, to make decisions, to make investments. Certainly, I'm from Wyoming, a huge energy state, which felt punished by the Obama administration. President Trump is working toward energy dominance. You saw that with the now allowing more exploration for energy in Alaska as part of what passed last night.
Right. And as Bill was mentioning earlier, not a lot of people have had a chance to know that, just how big this bill is and all encompassing of things like that it is. So now you've got this victory. One might say you've got some momentum going as a party. Can you carry that into 2018? What's next for the Republican Party?
Well, what's next is to continue to tell the American people what's in this, to find out how it impacts them personally. There's a story today. This is going to get more popular as people realize all across the country they're able to keep more of their hard-earned money. And we're going to sell that throughout the year as our candidates talk to voters in their home districts, in their home states. So, yeah, this is a record we can be proud of, but it's not just the economy. It's the judges that we put in place. 12 circuit court judges, the most by President Trump of any president, I think, in recent history in this first year in office. A conservative Supreme Court justice with Neil Gorsuch, and then eliminating the individual mandate from Obamacare, the most hated part of that health care law that made people buy a government-mandated program. I mean, that is gone. We have changed Obamacare from a mandatory program, Sandra, to a voluntary program.
Senator, you know, we've got a busy morning here with that vote coming up, so I'm sorry we're pinched for time, but real quickly, as far as any deal on DACA, that deadline is quickly approaching.
Well, the deadline that President Trump has set is actually March, and so there's time to do that. There are discussions, but for me, I'm going to focus on border security, enforcement, and ending chain migration. That has to be part of any agreement.
All right, Senator Barrasso, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Sarah Sanders checking her list for the White House at the end of this year.
The president has delivered on promise after promise, issue after issue, time after time, and we're just getting started.
So how will Americans grade this administration? A closer look at that coming up in a moment.
Plus, Ambassador Nikki Haley calling for action, why she argues Iran will continue to violate the nuclear deal.
It is only a matter of time before one of these missiles hits the target. If we don't do something, we will miss the opportunity to prevent further violence from Iran.